some injustices have been rising to the surface and really directly being seen. Something that has largely been able to be looked over, passed over, neglected, and I know even for myself that hearing this story of George Floyd, if you're not familiar with it, I'm sure you can easily look it up. It's everywhere right now. And all beings before him who have, suffered injustice because of the pigment of their skin. And it's coming to the surface right now. And to me, I really see this as like a deep wound, which we've all been aware of for a long time, but have, through our own defense mechanisms, been choosing not to see or feel, because it's a big pain to have to see and feel. And the doors have kind of flown open, and now we are all having to look and see and feel this thing that can be such a roller coaster of emotion, from rage and disgust to shame and guilt to anger and sadness and despair. And these are some huge emotions that, even putting this direct story aside, these are some huge emotions that we as human beings have been conditioned to try to avoid, to try not to feel, to try not to see, to just do whatever we can to stay busy and to look away. And what a wonderful time for this to be rising, with the world in a way. Some of us are still working, but being at quite a standstill. There's not a lot of places you can turn to try to avoid this thing anymore. And when I say this thing, I mean just injustice. It's a lot of emotions, and we speak a lot about emotions here, especially being a Tantra school, because to me, and I think also to Bhairav, these are our greatest teachers. They both show us where we're still blocked, where we're still holding ourselves in person, and they also are the potential to show us the greatest mysteries of life. If we can surrender and dissolve into fully feeling rage, then we can emerge in a way a more full being, because the pains of the world are your pains. When you start to see yourself as pure consciousness or pure awareness or the universe itself, rage, disgust, hatred, racism, all of these things exist inside of you. And as long as we're saying, not me, I didn't do it, or I don't identify with that, or anger doesn't exist inside of me, or I don't like to feel sadness, I don't like to feel hopeless, then we're denying a part of ourselves. It's just really difficult to open up to these parts of ourselves. But it is, in and of itself, a spiritual journey, a spiritual practice. If you want to know yourself as a whole being, you have to be able to feel these things. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that we then set out to, okay, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, I'm going to feel rage. I'm going to feel nothing but rage, because this will make me a whole being, because that is what Artemis said. No, you take each emotion as it comes, and maybe you can't even label it. I know for myself, like, first hearing this story, there was a deep nauseousness in my stomach, and I don't think I can label it as one thing, and it comes in these waves, and maybe I can label each wave as a different thing, but the labeling doesn't really matter. It's feeling what's happening in the present moment that really matters. And when we can rest as this witnessing, and not as a distant, disassociated witnessing, but as a witnessing of the full experience, from this place a natural movement can rise to make change in the world. And maybe that might just be within your own family, or within your neighborhood, or your community, or maybe in your country, or maybe in the world. We don't necessarily have to, we have this desire sometimes to, I feel rage and injustice, and now I'm going to, I don't know, run for president because I feel I can make change. It doesn't have to be such a grand thing. It can be that you make shifts in your life and you become more aware of the injustices and the actions that you take in your life that affect other people. Speaking also about environmentalism, you start to become aware that when you buy plastic products, that this is really affecting, and it's an injustice for the earth. And so you can decide to stop buying the plastic containers, and you can try to encourage other people to do the same. But as long as we are, in my opinion, pushing from what's the word, hatred, let's say. And there's a difference, a very big difference between anger and injustice and hatred. But if, for myself, I was quite an activist when I was in university against environmentalist injustices. But I was angry and hateful. And because of this, no changes happened. And so I just built more and more hatred. But in time, coming to a space more of love and compassion, which this person has asked about, from compassion, great change happens. And so then, speaking also about this particular instance with George Floyd, we can look at these police officers and have a lot of anger and have a lot of disgust and have a lot of rage, but we don't necessarily have to have hatred towards them. We can also, from a tantric perspective, see them as a gift in a way, because this was caught on camera, there is going to be change. We are going to insist that things change. We're not going to allow this to pass by. And that is a really difficult place to come to. And again, speaking for myself, compassion is something that I was raised Catholic, and so I still have this connection with Mother Mary, and maybe for each of you there would be a different representation of compassion for you. But when a particular being really pushes my buttons, then I know that they're part of my yoga, they're part of my practice, and I need to put a picture of them on my altar, and I need to imagine myself in a way as Mother Mary and holding this person as my child. Ram Dass spoke about how he put, I believe it was Trump, and other beings that, like Hitler, on his altar, so that every morning these are the people that he had to look at, because he knew that that's where his work was. His teacher and people who inspired him were also on his altar, but also were these things in the world that he didn't want to look at. He recognized that when he gave a satsang or a question and answer period, that his eyes avoided people in wheelchairs. So then at the end, he made sure that he went up and he spoke to that person in the wheelchair, because he could see that there was something in him that wanted to look away from this part of himself. And again, if we want to recognize ourselves fully, we need to look at even, and especially even, the parts that we want to turn away from.